Hello and welcome back to the Azeem Digital Asks Podcast, the all-round digital marketing podcast. We are fully back in swing with the new season, a few episodes down, and I'm really, really excited for this episode today. We have got someone who is an absolute legend, Amy Hopper, joining us today. Amy, thank you very much for joining.
It's a pleasure, as always, as always.
You cannot help but smile whenever you have a conversation with Amy because she's just an absolute legend. But you're here to see and listen from her, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking. We are going to be talking about something, a piece of research that Amy has done predominantly with agencies and software houses about some of the key well-being challenges that they're having internally at the moment. I'm really, really excited to dig into this with Amy. But before that, for those people who shamefully do not know about you, Amy, who you are, what you do, would you mind giving an intro to yourself, please?
Of course. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me on, Azeem. I'm Amy Hopper. I am a sociologist by trade, specialising in the sociology of work and alienation in the workplace. But previous to that, for my sins, I'm an ex marketing agency CEO and marketing consultant. So know very, very much about the area. I now run a company called TOA Group, which is a performance consultancy specialising in removing wellbeing barriers to produce higher performing teams.
Nice. And again, that is why I don't introduce people because I would not have done it as well as you did.
Elevator pitch down.
So yeah, look, as I mentioned, I gave a nod to this study that you did, and I think that's probably the best place to start. So, would you mind sharing a little bit about what that actually is and what actually inspired you to start looking into these sort of challenges that agencies and software houses are having?
Of course. So, I mean, as part of TUA Group, what we do is we are there to enhance performance, not just in marketing agencies, software houses, but all businesses as a whole. And the performance consultancy game, it normally comes from the angle of sort of like your traditional business coaching or your economics perspective, looking at the bottom line, facts, figures, black and white, etc. Whereas we take more of a psychological and sociological approach to it. So although the term well-being is somewhat bastardized, 'cause it means everything like doing yoga on a rooftop to drinking green tea. We're seeing it as no, we're enhancing the performance of the team. It's reflecting on the bottom line, we're improving efficiency, reducing turnover rates, etc. It's just that we're using well-being methods as a tool to do that. And as part of that, we need to make sure that we're keeping our ears to the ground and actually not resting on our laurels and thinking, okay, well, we're qualified sociologists, so we know this, we've read this study, but actually asking people what is going on, what is happening for leaders, what is happening for agency owners, what is happening for the people in these teams, so that when we go in and we're creating workshops and we're creating new systems to be able to tackle these challenges and come up with solutions, but it's actually reflective of what's going on, not what we've just read in a book. So I did a keynote for GIDA, the Grow Your Digital Agency conference. And it was a keynote on how to grow resilience within the agency, within yourself, and grow your agency through those challenges. And some of the conversations I had afterwards were incredibly, incredibly interesting. So every quarter we decide to do we do this research. We either pick a certain subject or we pick a certain industry. So we chose to do it within marketing agencies, software houses. We took 40 agencies in the UK, Romania, Hungary, and Poland. Interviewed the agency leaders and created this, I suppose, research packet on what was actually going on.
Nice. So very thorough and very broad as well, not just in the UK. I have my own thoughts on it, but that's for a different day. Um, so yeah, look, I guess let's just dive in. So, what were some of the main well-being issues that came out of this research?
It was really interesting actually because it didn't really reflect on, regardless of size, regardless of country, and regardless of type of business, there were some really, really common threads that came out as challenges that all of them were facing. that all centered around, just as a foundation level, all centered around communication and the way that we communicate, particularly in the light of COVID. People coming back into the office, got some hybrid working, some people fully remote first, and communication was a huge factor. And it was coming up with things like some people were having a lot of issues boundary setting, either people taking on too much work or not taking on enough and not communicating that to their team, therefore the flow of work gets upset. There seemed to be a lack of collective well-being, a lot more individualistic thinking rather than thinking of the team as a whole, or the agency as a whole, or the flow of work as a whole. And I think probably one of the biggest things we're seeing, particularly with the smaller agencies, the smaller software houses, that they're in that stage of wanting to grow, or in that tipping point period between different size levels. There was this anxiety around needing to implement process and needing to implement change and create more processes for better flow of work and create better foundation as the business grew, but also not wanting to appear micromanaging and not wanting that change to be implemented successfully with all of the team on board. That was a really, really big factor that a lot of the agencies I spoke to were having problems with, paired with I think what we've all experienced, all entrepreneurs experience, that sort of perfectionism. I can't let something go. I can't let go of the train, because you're gonna have to realize that there are going to be people that fall down, there are going to be people that make mistakes as you let those reins go, and thinking about the longer term effect of how positive that's going to be for short-term discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely. I laughed because in a very similar way, I've experienced the same myself in the past. It's hard to give up control of something that you sort of built basically from the ground up, pretty much. So you've talked a lot about this, and you've kind of nudged onto a question that I'm going to ask you later on anyway. But in terms of what you found out from the back of this, is there anything that you sort of didn't expect, something that surprised you in the findings? I mean, you probably had some sort of idea of what you might find out, but was there anything that you saw and you just thought, wow, I wasn't expecting this?
There wasn't so much things I weren't expecting, but I suppose the thing that surprised me the most is that in the industry that we work in and in digital, and we're actually really forward thinking in general. Like, a lot of us are on board with well-being, knowing how important it is, knowing how employee well-being and how happy people create better work. Like, a lot of us are in that thinking. A lot of us have already invested in therapy, and a lot of the agencies that I spoke to have their own structures, their own ways of working, or even provide therapy or provide therapy services to their teams, which is absolutely incredible to hear. I suppose one thing out of that I found a little surprising is there is still this mindset of therapy or using these like sort of services that I provide when things get tough, rather than thinking of it as a preventative service and investing in therapy and encouraging your team to use the services that you're providing before it gets to that point. Like, you don't want to be, instead of running around putting out the fire, make sure the fire doesn't start in the first place. And making sure, or using those services to keep yourself well and keep everything ticking along really nicely, rather than using it as a fire extinguisher when you think, oh my God, everything's on fire.
Yes.
And that's probably like a big thing I found that was across the board, no matter what the size.
I feel like that should be on a t-shirt instead of...
Every time I talk to you, you like a quote that I say.
It's because you're so quotable. That's a compliment. We should get t-shirts to say.
What was the last quote? Oh, digital is the industry where you go to sleep an expert and wake up a novice.
Another one. I've marked that. That's going to be all over socials next week. So
love it. I love being quoted. Thank
we
you.
should start a side business of, like, marketing quotes and t-shirts. We could make it. Anyway, we digress. I apologise. It's quite interesting, really, and you can see me like nodding away. I'm just trying to absorb everything you kind of touched on in one of your earlier answers, between the sizes of companies. Were there any sort of major differences you saw in some of the challenges between the smaller businesses and the larger businesses, or was there a lot of commonality between them?
There was a lot of commonality between them, a hell of a lot of commonality. I suppose the small businesses, there was more of the challenge of wanting to give away work and that control and that perfectionism. But I'd say with the larger businesses, they still have this huge communication challenge between, not only between different teams, but also between different ages. And when you've got different generations and the way that they communicate being very, very different. So the smaller businesses, they tend to be more interaction between people. People tend to know people more on a personal level. And therefore, I hate this phrase, and I don't like it when people use it, but that there's more of a sense of family, quote unquote. So people are often more aware of other individuals' struggles, whereas in the larger businesses, there is this idea of sometimes you don't know the face behind an email. So the collective well-being is not as high, and it's much more sort of individualistic, particularly if people are working from home and not necessarily seeing people face to face. It's more them having more difficulties with collaboration, boundary setting, taking accountability for work, and sometimes that process of work, from getting it from the top of the funnel all the way through to delivery and payment, that process is becoming much longer and disjointed. Because the flow of communication is not as easy. It's not as easy, sorry.
I'm going to pick your brains a little bit more about that.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
You just got me thinking when you were talking about different sizes of company, and I wanted to ask you about geography as well, but I kind of wanted to do a 2-in-1 question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Anything that you saw that stood out based on different geographical locations, and then also as a free bolt-on, I presume a lot of these companies work across different time zones as well. So did you see any sort of challenges that people had, especially when working in different sizes of companies, different locations, and also different time zones as well?
For sure. There was definitely a geographical difference. For sure, the agencies that I spoke to, the agency leaders that I spoke to, and they brought up these challenges themselves, and they said that we're in the UK. I know we have a lot of things and a lot of progress we still need to make, but in general, most people, particularly within the digital industry, are aware of wellbeing challenges, imposter syndrome, anxiety, depression, mental health issues, and that what they are, kind of how to recognise them and how to what needs to be done to do something about it. There is a general sort of base knowledge that exists, and the stigma is reducing. People are able to have conversations like this about therapy, about their therapist. Whereas in Eastern Europe, and when I was talking to the agencies in particular Romania and Hungary and Poland, that stigma still very much exists. And particularly when you're talking about communication and flow of work, there are people that will take on work or won't ask if they are having struggles, won't bring anything up, won't ask the question because they still have this idea of, I'm going to feel stupid, or I'm going to feel as though I am weak in some way if I ask for assistance, whereas a lot of the owners were getting very frustrated because they need this information, like they need to know. They don't want you to take on something that you can't do, because then they know that's going to create a larger problem later down the line. And it was about working with those owners and those directors to say, okay, well, what environment are we creating here to make sure that people genuinely feel psychologically safe in order to open up? Because a lot of these countries where you have to think, okay, well, one of the agency owners I spoke to, he said, I think the problem is that we used to be a communist country, and there's a huge level of distrust still with authority. And he said that feeds into our agency life, that feeds into our dynamic and our hierarchical system. So those are very, very difficult situations and have to be handled in a different way to how we would handle it in the UK, for sure.
Absolutely, and you've got me thinking about something which I definitely want to ask you about. It's definitely an assumption on my part, and I'm not the expert, which is why you're here, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I don't think that we can look at this topic in isolation. So I was going to say, how much of an impact do you think external factors play on people at work, such as politics? Like in the UK, we've had Brexit elections, etc., etc. You just mentioned there about previously being a communist country. How much of an impact, if any, do you think that these factors play on people's well-being at work?
It's huge. It's absolutely massive. It is. It's integral. And I mean, if you just even just look at the cost of living crisis, of course, there is going to be this a general anxiety of a society before they even get to work and experience their own challenges and or issues that may come up within the workplace. And if you've got someone who's coming to work and they can't afford their rent, or they're working two jobs, or they are having challenges with their family, they can't get a doctor's appointment, these are going to have massive, massive, massive implications on people before you even consider that they've got to do a job. And it's something that we talk to leaders about with regard to when we do empathy training or empathy and leadership training. In that, yes, people are there to work for you. Yes, you have a company. Yes, you have a job, and they've got a job to do. But at the same time, you need to be aware of what's going on for that person individually and what's happening in society as a whole. Because being more aware of that, more empathetic of that, will make you a better leader, and will also get those people doing better work for you at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Let me pick your brains a little bit further on that, and then we'll go into how organisations should tackle these challenges. So when it comes to empathy, I had a conversation with a friend recently once, and he's a manager in a different organisation. He's got somebody in his team, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was just something like a document needed to be delivered from this person to another person, and he had sight of the document because he was CC'd into it. The person who created it, he said, has had some issues at home, didn't go into it, but they didn't deliver the document to the other person. And he basically said, I'm not going to send it on that person's behalf because that's their job, regardless of their well-being issues. How often do you see like situations like this, and how do you approach that? Like, my first reaction was, that's quite harsh, really. I know it's a very specific situation.
Yeah.
Somebody's obviously having challenges. I think about, like myself, when I've had challenges, work is a nice welcome distraction for me. I throw myself into it. But to just be quite, in my opinion, cold and be like, look, that's his job. He needs to do it. Where do you draw the line between being empathetic and then going overboard in speech marks?
That's a really, really good question. And it is something that came up a lot in the research that we were doing in the leaders, managers, directors. Where is the line between wanting to be empathetic and understanding of someone's personal situation, and also at the end of the day realizing that there is still a job to be done, and there is still a business that has to run and function and make money. And that question is something that one needs to be answered by each person, each business owner, each manager individually on where they believe that line is with their team, and in line with the goals of the business. But also, at the end of the day, we are all human beings. And although that in that situation, I don't know the complete context of that situation, I would wonder what the person might say if the situation had been reversed. And he was the one that was having struggles that were no fault of his own, and had just made a mistake and not sent a document through. And we tend to find that in those situations where we have practiced empathy towards someone, practiced collective well-being, and shown our humanity and our vulnerability, that when we are unfortunately in that situation, which we are likely to be, because the world dishes out its cards randomly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Having shown that to someone else, it is perhaps more likely that we will also receive that kindness for ourselves, which is definitely something that I've experienced in my life, for sure.
Plus one, definitely. I don't want to stop you because I'm learning loads from you. So, on that theme, how would you say some of the organisations have sort of tried to tackle these wellbeing challenges? Are there any sort of interesting strategies and approaches that you've seen?
One really interesting strategy that I saw was a really, really interesting agency, a great agency owner, and a lot of these, a lot of the things that were coming up, they were saying, okay, well, let's look at how you're hiring and the personality types you're hiring. And there was one guy that I was having a conversation with. I shan't mention his name, but he said that every single person that he hired, he took that he got to sit, like, he took out for dinner and assessed whether he enjoyed the dinner. And in that situation, I thought, okay, well, how does it work? He said, okay, well, I don't hire so much based on skill. I hire on personality, and I hire on whether that person's personality is going to fit and mesh in with the team, and how they're going to fit onto that sort of board. And if I enjoy the dinner and I enjoy spending time with that person, and I'm able to communicate with them, that's the most important thing. So he based all of his hiring based on communication and based on whether he enjoyed the dinner, and therefore created this system. When I said, I was going through some of the challenges that other agencies are having, there were sort of key communication, boundary setting, change implementation, etc. I said, are you having any of these? He said, no, I don't have any. He had a whole different set of challenges, but didn't have any of the others that resulted from communication. And I just thought that was a really, really interesting perspective. Obviously, probably wouldn't work for everyone, particularly the larger ones, going and having to do like 200 dinners every month. But I just thought, that's really not something that I can really put in a workshop as you should do this. This is a great strategy, but a strategy that he had developed and worked really well for him and his agency.
Oh, I love that. You've just reminded me of something quite funny, which I'm going to share very briefly. Many years ago, I got to the final stage of an interview, right? And before the final stage, they made me do like one of these online personality tests. I didn't think anything of it. The final stage was with the CMO and two other people. The other two other people were in the room. Beginning of the interview, the CMO walks in, slaps down this like 10-page document on the desk. No hello, nothing. He says, right, we're in a situation. Here's option A. Here's option B. I need you to pick one right now because I believe that you sit on the fence too much and you fold under pressure. Is that true? And I was like, well, hello. Nice to meet you too. And I was like, I'd rather the dinner option than just believe in like an online thing which probably doesn't tell you anything. And I picked an option and I was like, what does this mean? And then he said, well, this thing says that you might fold under pressure and you're too diplomatic, you can't pick an option. So the dinner option is a fantastic shout. I love it. I might steal it. So apologies to you.
Yeah. Oh, it's not mine. Mine. Yeah. I thought it was a great thing, but yeah, I like that. I think that's kind of like monitoring your stress response, right? Whether you're gonna pick how you're gonna respond, rather than whether you actually pick an option. I imagine, but people have different ways of how they hire. I think also as well the agencies that I found or the businesses that I find that are most successful, and also the businesses that tend to bring TOA in to do workshops and this kind of work, it's the ones that really practice what they preach. I think there is not so much in our industry, but in other industries I've seen, there is sort of this tick box culture of, oh yes, we do wellbeing, tick. Yes, we look after people, tick. They've got therapists to talk to, done. Like done and dusted, boom, wellbeing done, pat ourselves on the back. and actually, it's about practicing what you preach, and that's not, Amy, come in and work with my team. I'm like, no, you're part of this. This is everyone being involved and practicing what you preach from the top down. Like your team are not going to be, working within their 9 to 5 hours and not doing emails outside of work if you're in the office till 7, 8 p.m. and they can see that. They're not going to feel safe talking honestly and feel like they're in a safe psychological space in order to do so if you don't do the same and you don't foster that environment. So the ones that that are most successful in that area are the ones that really get involved and show their vulnerability as well.
Yeah, I love that, and you've kind of nodded onto the next area I was going to ask you about in terms of leadership and how important they are when it comes to situations like this. I guess it's a case of sort of practicing what you preach, I guess.
Yeah, completely. And I think as well, it's about realizing that, yeah, your business you've got business goals and you've got team goals, and everyone is working towards those. But realizing that everyone is an individual, and also no one loves your business as much as you do. I think it was a dare I say, a Gary Vee video that I saw, which said, you're going to love your business. You're going to love your business 10 out of 10. No one's going to love your business 10 out of 10. Stop expecting them to. But if you could get them to 7, you've done a great job. But realizing that people are individual, they've got their own individual goals. Not everyone wants to win. Not everyone wants to make the huge amount of profit. Everyone has individual motivations. If you can find out how people are individually motivated, what they want, whether it's time off, whether it is more money, whether it is more personal development budget, whatever it is, find out what that is, then essentially you've got a cheat sheet to win and push people and your businesses as far as you want it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I didn't really frame it or think of it in that way in terms of, 10 out of 10 and try and get people to a 7. So that's really really helpful. Thank you. Another quotable, I should say.
I can't have that one. That's definitely Gary Vee. I've nicked that. I've nicked that for sure.
It's all good. It's all good.
There's this idea when we're talking about this tick box culture as well, as when I say treating people like individual, particularly in the performance industry. And you'll get other performance consultants and they'll have this amazing list of people they've worked with, we've worked with Olympians and we've worked with Manchester City Football Club and we've worked with blah, 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 blah. And I think that's wonderful. Those are great people, but every single person on that team wants to win. They've all got the same goal. Sandra in HR, she doesn't want to win the Premier League. Sorry, she doesn't care. She wants to probably come to work, have a good work-life balance, do a good day's job, feel like she's made a difference, and go home and see her kids. So, treating people like individual is really, really important if you're going to then focus them towards the company goals as a whole.
I'm gonna make it my mission now when I'm editing this podcast is find out who works in HR at Man City Football Club. I just send them a T-shirt and say...
That's me on a T-shirt. That was a quote I actually had, Sandra in HR doesn't want to win the Premier League.
Oh, I love that. No, you're absolutely right. And again, I didn't even think of it like that, which, again, although there's humour involved, it's actually really, really understandable. And some of these things, certainly I'm finding having a conversation with you now, you don't immediately think about these things, you just kind of sort of gloss over them. But when you frame it like that, it does take you back a bit and you think, God, this is something that I actually need to look at. We are rapidly approaching the end, but I've got 2 more questions for you. And one of them is literally this. If there are people in agencies or software houses who are listening or watching this episode, they've already taken away so much gold information from you. But if there's some advice that you can give to them who they're looking to improve their workplace well-being, for example, what would that advice be?
I would say empathy is the most important tool you can have as a leader or as a work colleague. And I would also say that if you're looking to engage in therapy and or any sort of wellbeing practice or personal development practice, to do so before the fire starts. To do it to make sure the fire doesn't start and keep you in a good place, rather than thinking it's something you only do when the challenge begins.
I love that, absolutely. And then to sort of bolt on to it, because I'm sure in your professional experience you've probably come across this stereotypical person who, let's say, somebody's watched this or listened to this and they go back to, let's say, somebody in the board, CMO, CFO, CEO, whoever, they've gone back and they've said, right, I've watched this incredible podcast and I think we could benefit from having our workplace well-being looked at and assessed and improved. That person will immediately say, sounds great, but how much money is it going to make me? Yeah. What would your advice be to those people to try and have these conversations with very number-oriented, number-driven, sort of, I would say, tough exterior, stiff people?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question because we get that all the time, particularly with well-being seen as woo-woo sometimes. It's not a cost, it's an investment. And it is the amount of, so for example, just the figures with regard to presentees people coming into work when they feel they have to, when they're actually ill, costs businesses twice as much as absenteeism. Just a simple fact of we did a workshop last year in which 2 C-suite team members were about to leave because they didn't like the culture, and we did the series of workshops. They didn't leave, and that saved the business £65,000 just in recruitment fees and retraining alone. So if you think how many people, it's about enhancing the efficiency and productivity of a business, whether that is reducing the turnover rate of staff, whether that is increasing ENPS scores, making people just generally happier, or it all has a huge tangible and measurable effect on the bottom line. This is an investment, it's not a cost. It's going to come back tenfold into your business.
I love that. That's gold. Thank you very much for sharing that in a perfect way.
Welcome.
Perfect way to round out the episode. But before I let you go, it would be a crime if I didn't give you the opportunity to tell people more about where they can find, follow, connect with you, and reach out with you.
Brilliant. You can go to toagroup.co.uk, get in touch there, or please connect with me on LinkedIn at Amy Hopper.
Legend. I'll share all of these in the show notes. Amy, thank you very much for giving up some of your time today. As always, my friend, it's been a pleasure. Lots of quotables. I've got at least 10, which I've marked down for myself to listen back to. So thank you very much. And yeah, I really appreciate it. That about rounds up this episode. As you've seen, Amy is a fantastic guest. Absolutely love it. Please do reach out to her, even if it's just to say thank you for taking the time to share your just in general awesomeness. And then the boring bits I always say at the end, please like, rate, share and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and we will see you on the next episode.